The God in the Well. I lived in an old-fashioned neighborhood, in an old-fashioned town as a kid, not befitting of the 21st century. It must have looked like something out of a vintage magazine advertisement at one point, but a coat of decay had been painted over everything. Unwieldy plant life clung to every building. There were burned-down houses nobody ever bothered to rebuild. There were closed buildings nobody ever bothered to reopen. It was the perfect place to live if you were a child with a preference for exploration or an elderly person with a preference against it. Everyone in between didn't much care for it. It was spring break, and I was broken. Broken in the left arm, specifically. That's the price one pays for exploration. I'd bumped my cast on the guardrails around the stairs that led to the church's entrance that day. Time passes slowly when you're that age. When you've only lived through 9 springs, you're not good at waiting. Waiting for your arm to heal is like waiting for the second coming of Christ, which the service that day was about. Another boy a year older than me noticed the cast. "Are you letting people sign that?" "I don't know. I've seen it at movies and on the TV. People let their classmates sign their cast." "You're not my classmate." "Donnie, we've done Sunday school together. Just let me sign it. When'd you get it anyway?" "If you'd been paying more attention, you'd know it was 2 weeks ago." He started signing it without waiting for affirmation. He had a red crayon on hand. His signature read, Ben. If one could call it a signature. It was closer to print. He hadn't figured out a fancy way to write his name yet. "I'm trying to heal right now. It's hard for me not to be able to do stuff. My family's praying on it." "That ain't gonna work. You wanna know what really works?" "It will too work. Don't say things like that near the Lord's house." He could tell he'd offended me, so he backed off. It was a week later, and many other signatures had huddled up next to his. I could feel no progress in my arm. It's just as broken as ever. So I decided to approach him about it. "We've been praying for my arm to heal, and nothing has happened yet. It still feels the same." "I told you it wouldn't work." "I wanted to ask you about that. What does work?" He leaned in and shifted his lower jaw around in anticipation. "If you want to get something healed, you gotta go to the real God. Not the fake one. The fake God's in there." He pointed to the church. "The real God's in the well." "Why?" "Because it's where people don't expect him to be." "What well?" "Taylor's well." "Where's that?" "You'll have to talk to Taylor. I could take you to him." I told my parents I was going off to play with a friend. They were permissive when it came to that sort of thing. Ben and I bothered insects walking through weeds and flowers, hopped over creeks, and walked down roads I'd never used until I realized we were back in my own neighborhood. It was simply a part of it I'd never visited. A dead-end street hidden under the curve of a hill and behind a curtain of intrusive trees. The sidewalk started and ended where it shouldn't. Weeds and grass blades erupted out of the cracks between each cement rectangle, and the street looked like some giant had taken a hammer to it. Houses that may have once been homogeneous were now individuated by different degrees of decay and abandonment. It was everything I recognized about the town distilled into one area. I heard a dog barking at us from somewhere. Ben decided to reassure me. "Don't worry, he's trapped behind a fence. He can't kill you or nothing." He gestured to a decrepit one-story house with a "Beware of Dog" sign outside. "Does he want to kill me?" Ben realized he'd said the wrong thing, and stopped himself from doing it again. "Don't you worry about nothing. We're close to God anyways." He brought me to the least unkempt house in the area and rang its doorbell. Another boy opened the door. He was older and huskier than either of us. His eyes went to my cast as soon as he got a look at me. "Come in." His house was a mess. A dog, less threatening than the one outside, sat amidst a mound of stuffing it had ripped out of some unfortunate pillow. The trash bag in the kitchen was overflowing, and things that shouldn't be anywhere but in a trash bag were all over the floor. Nothing looked like it had been swept, dusted, or vacuumed in years. I had to ask a question. "Do you live here alone?" "Much of the time." "Do you have parents?" "Some of the time." "You've healed people before?" "He has. The God in the well. Every kid in the area with a physical problem finds their way here eventually. The word always reaches them. God works in mysterious ways. Ben decided to wedge himself into the conversation. Taylor and I go way back. They weren't old enough to go way back, unless they knew each other as babies. Ben had probably heard that phrase from someone else and not understood it. I knew what he was getting at, though. Where's the well? The house next to this one. Nobody lives there. We headed into his backyard. The grass was high enough to be irritating to walk through. An unused lawnmower rusted near the door. Taylor turned to us. We're hopping the fence. And so we did. I'd hopped fences before, but not with a broken arm. We were taken to a different yard. A larger yard that was given even more to the wild. Fences separated it from the dead-end street, but not from the woods that crept behind it. A ways out from the house behind us was a well. The sort of thing you didn't see often outside of old-fashioned neighborhoods in old-fashioned towns. This is where God is. Under the ground, in the well. Not many grown-ups know this. It's a secret. And you've got to swear not to tell any of them about this place. Not unless they're desperate enough to heal a child that you could trust them. They'd build a church over it. They'd sing and drive and hammer nails and make an awful lot of noise. The God in the well wouldn't like this. The last 10 or so steps I had to take toward the well were more difficult than the rest of the journey so far. What happened to the version of me a week ago who'd shut down Ben for speaking blasphemy? Now the well was within my sights. What if God wasn't in the well? What if God, who was in the church, decided to damn me for not trusting him? But he hadn't healed my arm yet. As far as my child mind was concerned, no progress had been made despite praying on it every day. Walking up to it couldn't hurt. Looking in it couldn't hurt. A circle of bricks, a triangular prism roof, and a bucket dripping from a rope. It was unremarkable, just as worn by weather as the house it hid behind, as the rest of the dead-end street. My legs moved as if it were they, not my arm, that were injured. Ben put his hand on my shoulder and offered a warning. Don't go any further unless you're sure. Unless you believe. The call to believe forced more doubt into my head. Taylor was less patient than Ben. Either walk up to the well or don't. What do I do after I walk up to it? You wait. That's what you do. I got close enough to look down the well into the dark. I couldn't see the bottom of it. Its roof curtained it with a shadow that no shimmer managed to tear through. I didn't like looking into the well. I couldn't stop imagining myself falling into it, or imagining Taylor pushing me in. Taylor began to instruct me. You have to wait by the well. Wait until nightfall. It could take hours. My parents will be upset with me if I don't come home. They'll be happier that you'll have your arm back. Was it a trick? Was it a joke? If so, I could make it back home fast enough. I'd figured out the way back. It's not as if I didn't know where I was. I invented explanations in my head while I sat by the well. Explanations that sounded less sacrilegious. I'd later learn that Ben called my parents to say I was at his house, and Taylor called Ben's parents to say Ben was at his house. There weren't many streetlights here. Night was night. I could see the stars, but everything else radiated darkness. The kind of darkness that threatened to swallow me up. I'd gotten over my fear of the dark, but this was a new context. A context that wrestled that particular fear back into the open. Crickets and the occasional barking dog scored the experience from a distance. Saved me from potentially maddening silence. I had no way of knowing how late it was. A spider crawled across the edge of the well. Without thinking twice, I flicked it inside. Let it fall into the darker, still pit. I was tempted to doze away. I might have, because after a slow blink, I heard a voice. I heard it the same way I hear voices in my dreams, and not in the way I hear them while awake. Donnie, Donnie, Donnie. I looked around and said all I could think to say. That's my name. It is my name too, for all names are mine to take as I see fit. The voice echoed from behind and below me, from the bottom of the well. Are you going to heal me? First, you must pray to me. I pray that you will heal me. Amen. Nothing happened. Why didn't you heal me? That wasn't good enough. But those were the rules. You were insincere. This answer did not satisfy me. He stepped around my concern. I decided to sweeten things up. I decided to think about how happy I would be. How happy my family would be, even were I to return home with a fully healed arm. I stopped thinking and spoke. God in the well, I come before you as your humble servant. I give you my left arm so that you may please heal it. Amen. You try to prove your sincerity now. I'm new to this. You must jump into the well. Why? To prove yourself. Jump. Doing so will not harm you in the way that you imagine. Will I land on you? I have no body. Not yet. It's why your kind have not discovered my kind. There is nothing for you to land on. I felt something akin to a harsh wind urging me into the well. I could not resist it, and so I fell. I fell for what felt like hours. I passed through some liquid so dark that it didn't shine in the moonlight, passed through it soaking wet, and continued falling until I dried, and a harsh light came at me from below and I crashed into it, finding myself outside the well as the sun rose. I tore off my cast because I could feel the difference. My left arm had healed. Light either seemed to reflect from or radiate off of it, at least for a moment before dissipating. I had witnessed my first miracle. My parents couldn't believe it. Who would? They'd known that I'd authentically broken my arm, though. They settled on the explanation that a miracle had occurred, that their prayers for me had been answered. I didn't tell them about the God in the well. My arm, which ordinarily felt fine, began to experience a cramping, burning sensation every time I attended church with my family. The sensation would come when I entered the doors and leave when I exited. I could tolerate it, though. It's not like I needed my left arm at church. Taylor insisted it was because God had marked my arm, and false places of worship rejected it as such. Ben and I recommended the God in the well to more people. Taylor felt that if enough children came to understand where to look for God, the next generation would achieve greater spiritual elevation. We'd have special knowledge our parents' generation didn't. There was a boy named Stephen who broke his nose. There was a girl named Janet who suffered from a swollen spleen. There was a boy named Jamie who had the worst case of strep throat I'd ever seen. Every time we brought someone to the well, I was amazed. Some of them didn't even attend the local church, so I didn't imagine they experienced the pain I did when I attended. Years passed, and I ended up attending a college within driving distance. I wasn't attending church anymore. I was able to put the God in the well out of my mind during my freshman year. The fact that Janet attended the same college was the only thing that occasionally caused me to reminisce. I'd explained none of it to my roommate Malik. I'd like to think that if he suffered an injury or came down with a terrible illness, I might have. But in reality, I was embarrassed, and his good health was simply an excuse not to sound crazy in front of him. It wasn't until the sophomore year that the hunger began. A strange kind of hunger. It radiated from my left arm rather than my stomach. But hunger is all I know to call it. The pangs were at first hard to distinguish from the sort of sensation one feels when one's muscles are reconstructing after exercising them. But it became clear to me that it was something else. My arm was marked by the God in the well, and hungered to return there. I experienced flashes of the well, awake and asleep, and salivated. It was a place, not a food I hungered for. I never experienced anything like it. I ran into Janet on campus one night, or rather, she went out of her way to run into me. Her eyes bugged toward mine. You felt it too, don't you? The hunger. I did. We'd both thought to call it the same thing. Yeah. You know what we have to do, right? We have to go back to the well. I'd considered it. So that settles it. We go together Sunday. I didn't object. She was set on it. When Sunday came around, the two of us hopped into her car and headed to my old neighborhood. I didn't have to provide her with instructions. She knew where she was going. She was hungrier than I was. I could tell that much. Maybe it's just harder to ignore when it's coming from your spleen. She explained herself during the ride. At first, I thought I just needed food. I stuffed myself, but it didn't work. The hunger persisted. I didn't feel it in my gut because I needed food. I felt it in my gut because that's where I was marked. I need to see the well again. What if it's not like we remember? We were just kids. I don't care if it's like we remember. I need to see it. The dead-end street was in an even greater state of disrepair than I'd last seen it by the time we arrived at 6 p.m. that night. Jumping fences gets easier as you get taller, but harder as you get heavier. I was thankful to have developed in a lanky direction. As soon as we'd hopped the fence, Taylor was there to greet us. It had been several years since I'd last interacted with him, but had no difficulty recognizing him. He spoke up.
"We've been waiting."
He led us further into the backyard. A campfire was situated on a patch of earth so that its sparks did not reach the wild grass. It stabbed at the air and its crackle overpowered the chorus of crickets I remembered attending every past visit to this place. Ben, Stephen, and 3 other young adults I didn't recognize sat around it. Stephen turned towards us. He couldn't stop rubbing his nose. "You got the hunger. We all did. It seems like it's only those of us who've come of age too. None of the kids." "We're missing Jamie," I inserted. "We're waiting," responded Ben. "There are at least 4 more people who should be here. You ain't met them all." One by one, we waited as more people arrived. Some came by car, and others walked. Jamie, who winced as he rubbed his neck, arrived last. It was 9 p.m., and we were all hungry. Taylor took charge.
"Everyone get around the well."
We did as he said. He seemed to be more familiar with the well than any of us were. The fire went out of its own accord, but my arm felt hotter than I could have ever imagined, as if it were being scalded from the inside out. It radiated light, as did Janet's gut, Stephen's nose, and so on. I could see which body part had been healed by the god in the well in each of the young adults who surrounded me, but was in too much pain to pay attention. Then, as if amputated by an invisible blade, my left arm detached itself from my body. Light flashed and skin bubbled over the wound. It was a bloodless process. I collapsed in shock as my arm wormed its way to the well. I saw legs, arms, a nose, throat, torso, each becoming an independent organism and crawling into the well. I was fortunate enough to have lost a non-vital part of my body. Janet, Jamie, and a few others who I didn't know by name weren't so fortunate. I couldn't move. I had no means by which to emotionally grasp what had just happened to me. By the time I managed to sit up, I saw something emerging from the well, cobbled together from the various body parts acquired. It was almost human-shaped, but had too many of certain parts. Too many arms. I remembered the words of the god in the well from years ago.
"I have no body. Not yet."
It saw that I was staring at it and drew closer to me. I wasn't used to moving with just one arm and tumbled. It had no trouble moving in its new body. Its 2 right hands clutched me and flipped me over. Its 2 left hands, one of which was mine there moments ago, grabbed my face and pulled it up. It was taller than me. It had 2 stomachs stacked on top of each other. It bent its spine until its face, which bore Stephen's nose, was inches away from mine. Then it smiled. I heard the voice I'd heard coming out of the well years ago. Only now I heard it in the way I hear voices while awake.
"Thank you."
A drop of drool trailed from its lips. It set me down and walked closer to the well.
"Thank you all. You have done a great service."
It darted away into the woods while I lay dumbfounded, surrounded by people missing body parts and body parts missing people. I didn't know where it went. I didn't know what it was doing. I just knew that it was doing it with my left arm. And that was The God in the Well by Beauxtt? Beauxtt? I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry. I'm doing my best. Correct me. You're absolutely allowed to correct me. So, this is another fantastic example of a story that kind of turns a concept on its head, right? It changes an idea that that is. So I've got to speak about it in a term of like religious doctrine, even though I'm not exactly the most well versed in that kind of a field. I'm not exactly the most religious person myself, but I do understand the concept of worshiping somebody higher than you and everything like that. So yet again, this kind of turns that concept on its head, and it's always a thing that I find really interesting to be played with. The fact that, like, well, what if your God isn't helping you? Would you turn to a different God, right? But then again, it's also brings in the idea of a false God and all this stuff, which then makes me think, well, in this case, a lot of these stories like to be like, oh, it's God who turns out to be like the devil or something like that. But in this case, I don't think that's quite it. I think it's just yet again a creature that has been referred to as a god, but he in and of himself doesn't make it sound like he is a god. Maybe, for all we know, maybe he's a different concept of a god, maybe a different version of a god, maybe there's more than one type of god, for example, like demigods, stuff like that. We can go on all day talking the semantics about how this kind of works. But either way, we're talking about a god-level entity, right? Let's go with that kind of terminology. And it's always interesting because you've got this idea that your god is not helping. Would you then turn to a different god who would help you, right? Obviously, people want to have their prayers answered. They obviously want to be heard and be helped, right? And so sometimes if you have that opportunity, you might take it. I can completely understand that logic behind it. The problem is you're also taking, it's a big leap of faith, isn't it? You're fully trusting something that you have zero context for. You don't know how it works. You don't know what you're going to get out of it. You don't know if it's a monkey's paw type situation where, or in like a djinn, for example, where, you'll get what you want, but there's a price for it, right? Which is essentially what's happened here as well. And it's this awesome concept of like, for years and years and years, everything was fine. Everything was normal. Anybody who was helped by this god in the well, things were fine. Until all of a sudden the hunger happens. And then it becomes this like Frankenstein amalgamation of pulling all these body parts that it has healed. It's basically been able to like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you, but it's borrowed time, right? And then pulls all the things together to form its own body, which has extra arms and extra body parts and stuff, I guess, because yet again, it just depends on who came to the well and blah, blah, blah. But inevitably, it needed at least a minimum amount of certain things to be able to form itself, and it just so happened to have extras, which then makes it more of a horrific abomination. Like I said, it makes me think of like a Frankenstein monster, right? Because yet again, Frankenstein's monster was, it's a bunch of parts of different people put together, so therefore it doesn't look, it's humanoid, but it's wrong, right? Like it's not meant to be existing, right? Which is horrific to say when you really think about the monster, because it's not the monster's fault that it is that way. And I guess that's kind of similar here, but the god in the well obviously knows what it's doing, and it lures its victims. And the fact that Taylor's super into it, maybe they have a deal going or something, right? Maybe the god in the well is inevitably going to try to, I don't know, kill humankind or something, right? Like, I guess a lot of evil creatures do. We're assuming this is an evil creature. And maybe in exchange, Taylor will be spared or something, right? That's what I feel about that situation. Otherwise, it's good. It's interesting, and it does make me ponder the questions of like, would people go against their faith to do something like this? It's a really interesting conversation. So down in the comments below, I'd really like to hear from you. I'd really like your idea and your perspective on how this might work in your world, in your way. Because for me, I don't know if I would trust it. But then again, I also have a horror-oriented mindset. Like, I understand that there are a lot of red flags about situations, and the thing is, I look at that shit and I'm like, yeah, I know I shouldn't be fucking with that. But I feel like there'll be plenty of people who would, right? So, let me know down in the comments below your thoughts, your ideas, how this made you feel. Maybe other things that it might have made you think of, for example, other movies, shows, and stuff like that. Because yeah, yet again, the only one that really comes to mind is Frankenstein's monster, but that's just because, yet again, it's an amalgamation of different body parts of different people coming together to create a monster, which is sad. It is a sad story, really, when you break it down. Otherwise, yeah, I don't really know what else I related to. I guess there is the other story I covered about the well, about a darkness that came from the well, but it's not exactly the same thing. I'll go ahead and put a link in the, I think it's like a little info card or something like that to it if you want to check out that story. It's a good little story. I did quite enjoy that one. It was like a crack team in the desert and stuff. It was really cool. But yeah, I liked the story a lot. It was great because, yet again, it makes you think, and I love that kind of shit. I love anything that makes you think. It's great. What the fuck was he? What is that entity? Maybe it's based on true mythology or something like that. In which case, I'd like a little bit more info if somebody could clue me in. Fantastic. Thank you so much for watching. This has been Nate at Night, and I'll see you next time. Take care out there. Thank you to the YouTube and Patreon members who've been supporting this channel so far. This has been a fantastic effort. Thank you so much. I couldn't do any of this without your support. Really, I really can't. Thank you. You can also show support through a donation at coffee.com/nateatnight, or whenever I'm live streaming through super chats of YouTube or through Twitch. And whenever you donate, I'll be sure to read your messages out on stream.